Formula One winter test in Jerez 2015. As you can see, the team are here having some well-earned R&R after long days, often starting at 6 in the morning and finishing our final edits at 11 in the evening. So, Adam, what the fuck? You're not Kimi Räikkönen. Get rid of the ice cream, man. Come on!
Break me up and steal what's left inside, and hope and pray iniquity has died.
We're just partaking of a rather fine sherry. And sherry is only made, properly known as made within Jerez. And this is from the Icecream bodega that we visited yesterday. Anyway, we must crack on. Let's start with Red Bull. Red Bull caused an enormous stir, as TJ13 predicted, prior to the test, by running with their bizarre livery, vinyl-wrapped, zebra-esque. We've named it the Zeb Bull. But it did exactly what the team intended to do, and that was to give their owner, Red Bull, the fizzy drinks company, a huge amount of media exposure.
Well, it was interesting to see some of the tech analysts try and compare what was on the car. Compared to last year's car, they only really managed to check out the side pods, the front of the car, and really not a lot else.
That's probably because, as we revealed on the Friday before the test, that the car is essentially the same as last year's car for the parts of the car which are on display. And the team are only expecting to bring significant differences in terms of the look of the aero parts by probably the beginning of the European season. However, we saw the Russian rocket reveal his prowess for the first time. What did you think of that, Adam?
Well, if it was my first time in a car, I would probably try and avoid the gravel traps. You know, just try and scoot low for a while and try and just make everything work rather than, you know, just trashing the only front wing that we had.
Yes, and the reason that the team only had the one nose was because it was crash tested on the Friday before the test, 4:30 in the afternoon. So by the time Danny got into the car on Monday, that's the only component they had. The next one was being manufactured at that time. I did think, though, that in the paddock he looked rather unsettled. It looked as though the pressure was getting to him. He certainly wasn't relaxed as Danny Ricciardo was.
Well, even on the fourth day when we saw him in the morning, he really did not look settled in that team. He still looks like a man who's maybe struggling to find his feet in Formula One, struggling to really get settled in a new team.
And probably got a lot to prove. And certainly big boots to fill, given what Danny Ricciardo did to Sebastian Vettel last year. And so on to the Little Bull team, Toro Rosso. This is the second time in recent history where they have canned their previous year's drivers and started the next season with new drivers. But I was particularly impressed with Carlos Sainz Jr. He appeared fearless in his approach to driving the car. His braking was particularly late, often into turn one. And he was quite fearless the way that he took the tricky 90-degree fast right-hander, turn 5, which leads onto the back straight.
While Verstappen's time was half a second quicker on the final day, conditions were far, far more suited for setting a quick time. And realistically, speaking to the team, Carlos Sainz Jr. is far, far better prepared for this year than Verstappen is.
And much of the hype has been about Max Verstappen. And yes, as Adam says, he set the quickest time for the team. But I think there are one or two people who think that Carlos Sainz Jr. is going to have the better of this pairing.
Now we turn to Renault. The French manufacturer were not sure about one component this time. Both teams were told to take care and not to push this component too hard. Seems not as all well.
They had battery problems, they had ERS problems, and the Toro Rosso team obviously ran a lot further than Red Bull did. I think for me, one of the most revealing things was Danny Ricciardo's interview after his first day in the car. He stuttered and his way through an answer to the question that said, is this engine better than last year's? And finally managed to say, I don't really want to get into that too much.
Now we turn our attention to Ferrari, who topped the timesheets 3 out of the 4 days in Jerez. 2.5 seconds quicker a lap? Yes, that's very important. Though, as well, we must consider the conditions were far, far worse this year than this time last year.
Yes, it was a lot colder, 2.5 seconds quicker than the time set in 2014. But what was interesting for me was that Sebastian Vettel was quite neutral in his attitude when doing his media exercises. He was neither particularly bullish nor was he particularly coded about the car being great or bad. In fact, it was Kimi who was uncharacteristically euphoric when he described the car as significantly better than last year. Ferrari have definitely made a move forward and be a team that are hoping to challenge Red Bull for second place in the Constructors' Championship 2015.
So now we now turn our attention to the Swiss team, Sauber, who have the Ferrari power behind them. They set their fastest time on the soft tyre, which realistically wasn't representative because a number of the other teams did not try that. Felipe Nasr was bullish when he spoke to me. However, he also requested more downforce from his engineers.
Yes, and the aero looks relatively simple compared to most of the other cars on display. And the other thing I noticed was the engine sounds quite different from the Ferrari engine, which leads me to suspect that maybe they were running a different configuration of the powertrain, Ferrari trying a few different things with the Sauber team to gather data. John Mayberg decided that the sound of the Sauber was like a warthog, so you may see further reference on TJ13 to the warthog in future. And the other thing about Sauber was they were the other team with two brand new drivers. However, Marcus Ericsson, who drove on the final day where conditions were far better, didn't take any advantage of that, and Felipe Nasr was quicker than him on the overcast day 3.
Now to the Enstone team, Lotus, who this year have switched to the Mercedes power. After missing day 1, they did manage to complete 190 laps in total.
But they had problems on day 2 with telemetry, and they were still trying to work out how to integrate the engine and chassis after receiving a fairly late delivery from Mercedes because they hadn't paid their upfront deposit. But Roman Grosjean was his old, engaging, smiling self in the paddock, and when we caught up with him, he said big time improvements over last year's Challenger. So Lotus have definitely got an advantage over Force India, who have not been in Jerez this week. Let's see if they can hold that as the racing begins in Melbourne. Williams appear to have evolved their 2014 car quite nicely. But what was fascinating was that they located themselves right down the other end of the paddock. There was at least 12, 14 garages between them and the next team, but they got on with their business quietly and efficiently throughout the week.
Indeed, it will be a big, big challenge for either Force India or Lotus to try and challenge them this year. They appear to have evolved last year's very slippery car into a very nice challenger this year. Massa spoke slightly on the subject of higher downforce. However, Pat Simmons remained his usual coy self in ushering away the attention.
Yes, well, he said he didn't want to comment specifically on the quantity of downforce that the team has found this year, but looked pretty confident when he was speaking to the media on that matter.
What can we say about Mercedes? The most dominant winter test ever, though actually never the fastest on any of the days.
Yes, and I spoke to a couple of guys from Brixworth, and when I suggested that maybe they were lacking a little pace, they grinned from ear to ear and said, wait until Barcelona. In fact, the team were running a highly developed 2014 engine, probably with most of the 32 tokens in play. So they didn't stress the engine fully. They were testing out these new components. Pace will come, and it will come before the first race in Melbourne.
Yeah, well, aside from that though, Lewis Hamilton appeared rather flat in press conferences. Saying that, he has just split up with Nicole, his girlfriend, for the 4th, 100th time. Jerez was a double disappointment for the fans of the working team. Now, we first of all got the livery, which was not particularly inspiring, however, and realistically at best average. However, Big Ron says this will change when and if the team get a title sponsor.
Yeah, and the Honda bit doesn't seem that prominent, considering they're investing huge amounts in the team and the young driver programme. But what I liked about McLaren Honda was, when I first saw the car, I thought the design at the rear was incredibly tightly packaged. A nice arse, maybe you could say. But This is exactly how Renault began their season last year, yet they didn't have the same problems, and the team in the paddock didn't have the air of deflation that we saw from the Red Bull employees in Jerez in 2014. But I do think 79 laps is probably below the expectations that McLaren and Honda had, and they're going to be looking for a lot more running come Barcelona.
Yeah, the Spanish Samurai will not accept that.
So that's all from thejudge13.com on the first test of 2015 in Jerez. We'd like to thank you all for the massive support you've given to our YouTube channel, and hopefully we'll be bringing you more in the near future. So, it's goodbye.
And it's goodbye from him.